As a Bears fan for almost 30 years now, I've watched my fair share of terrible quarterback play. But the one thing I've been really fortunate to be able to see as a Bears fan for so many years is great running back play. So I always value the running back position. I always have an admiration and a respect for the running back position and what it can do for an organization. So it's absolutely broken my heart over the past couple of years to see the ultimate devaluing of the running back position in the NFL draft to the degree that it has occurred, with the last two drafts producing for the first two times in history no running backs being taken in round number one. Thankfully, that is all changing, it looks like, here in 2015, as this is a really good, really deep, really loaded running back class, both at the top in terms of round one talent, day two talent, and even day three talent. This is a really good running back class, and I look forward to seeing these guys getting drafted, hopefully coming into the league, some of them wrecking shit up, and hopefully maybe that helps elevate the profile of the running back position in a little bit for future drafts to come. Now, in terms of this year's class, I do agree with that assessment again, that this is a really deep, really talented, really loaded running back class. However, I disagree somewhat with the assertions of that Gurley's number one and then Gordon's number two, and that's just the way it is. Now, I will grant you that when it comes to certain positions, it's very much in the eye of the beholder. I think quarterback is most certainly one of those positions, but I think running back a lot of times can be just as much, because in a lot of ways it could be dependent upon the skill sets of the back, the team, the fit, the scheme, all of these different things. Sometimes what you might value or prefer out of a running back. Now, me, as a guy that evaluates running backs, I tend to gravitate towards the all-around guys. You know, for a guy that's been able to watch Matt Forte the past several years, a guy that grew up on guys like Walter Payton and then even Neil Anderson after the fact, I understand the value that an all-purpose running back can bring to an organization. So, as a result, I tend to value those guys a little bit more as opposed to the guys that are maybe just a north-south between the tackles type of runner, or a guy that's kind of a twitchy type of running back, and then he's really good out of the backfield, but he's not much between the tackles. I hope that makes sense. I prefer to like those guys that are maybe a jack of all trades, but perhaps a master of none. Now, I will agree with the assertion that the number one running back in this year's draft class is Todd Gurley from Georgia. Even with the ACL injury and some of the concerns I have about his durability going forward, there is no question that he is a top-flight elite talent physically in this year's NFL draft. And there is no doubt in my mind that if he's somewhat healthy at the NFL level, he is going to be a Pro Bowl running back, if not an all-pro running back. This guy is a special type of talent. He's the best talent I've seen come into the draft at the running back position since 2007, when I saw both Marshawn Lynch and Adrian Peterson. I put Todd Gurley as a prospect at that type of level. I think this guy is a big-time player. He's a legit home run threat every time he touches the ball. He's a guy that can run between the tackles. He's a guy that can break it outside. He's a guy that can be a threat catching the ball out of the backfield. There's just so many things for me on film to really like about Todd Gurley's game. And I look at this draft and I say that if a team is going purely best player available, really anytime starting with pick number 3, I could make the argument for them that Todd Gurley would be, even coming off of the ACL injury, the best player available on the board. And basically what will happen as a result, pretty much any team that, especially a team that needed an impact difference maker at running back like a Todd Gurley that actually takes him in the top half of round 1 in the 2015 NFL draft, I will give them a say magnifique, terrific grade, because he is that special. He is that type of prospect, and as a result, I expect him to be drafted as such. I'd be stunned if he got past 16 to the Houston Texans. Frankly, now I'd be stunned if he made it all the way to 14 where the Dolphins are picking. I wouldn't be surprised if he was drafted in the top 10. And like I said, if he was healthy and he wasn't coming off of that ACL injury, we'd be talking about him as a top 5 player, and we'd be talking about him going to the Jags potentially at number 3. That's how good of a talent this guy is in this year's draft. No question about it. Now, in terms of the rest of the class, there's a lot of talk about Melvin Gordon being the number 2 running back in this class. Well, some of the big issues I have with Melvin Gordon are that he fumbles a lot. So ball security, something that can get him in a lot of trouble at the NFL level. He's questionable catching the ball out of the backfield, not something he was asked to do a whole lot at Wisconsin, nor did he demonstrate a lot of great skill to be able to do so at Wisconsin. So you're talking about a guy that's not like Gurley's size of 6'1", 230 pounds, that doesn't offer you much out of the backfield as a receiver. So it kind of limits your options in terms of what you could do with him. Now, I also look at a guy like Melvin Gordon, whose game is built off of speed and quickness, and I sit there and say, I see quicker backs. I see more explosive and faster backs in this year's draft. So I don't think he's that particularly special. He is a very good running back. There are some concerns for me that he may be a product of the Wisconsin system. I just think there are better options out there. I just think there are better guys that profile better to the NFL level. When people compare him to Jamal Charles, I understand somewhat in terms of the look that may make sense. In terms of vision and cutback ability, that makes sense. But Jamal Charles is a much better all-around running back. Jamal Charles is a much more explosive running back, and he most certainly was coming out of Texas. To me, Melvin Gordon is my number 5 rated running back in this year's draft class. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not going to be an 8, 9, 10-year productive NFL starter. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there are other guys that I would choose ahead of him, and I might look back and end up being wrong. Like I said, if he gets into the right system with the right team and they know how to showcase him, particularly if he gets into a one-cut zone blocking scheme, he might end up being the most productive back out of this class out of all of them. But again, based off of what I've seen on film, there are other guys that I like. My number 2 running back in this year's class is the Duke from the U, Duke Johnson. Now, he has some similar issues to Melvin Gordon in terms of his propensity to put the ball on the ground. That is something that concerns me. But I'm talking about Duke Johnson, and I look at him as perhaps the most complete all-around running back in this year's draft class. This is a guy to me that can literally do everything. Now, similar to Todd Gurley, I have concerns, even more concerns about Duke Johnson because of his size, because of his injury history, as to whether or not he could stay healthy enough to be an every-down running back at the National Football League level. But when I see Duke Johnson, I see a lot of things that remind me of LaShawn McCoy when he was coming out of Pittsburgh. And I look at a guy like Duke that I think can run between the tackles. He can bounce it outside. He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. He's better than some of these other backs in terms of blitz pickups and pass protection. There's just so many things I like about Duke Johnson's game. Sometimes, like I said, it's hard to quantify. It's just when you see it, you know it. And to me, I feel that Duke Johnson is the second best prospect in this class for running backs. I think TJ Yeldon is number 3. Here's a guy that had all this buzz coming into Alabama as a freshman, and I don't think he ever quite lived up to it. But when you look at the NFL level, you're looking at guys that have all the things. Here's a guy with that size, with that explosiveness, maybe more explosiveness on the field than what actually measures in combine drills. But here's a guy that can run with power, a guy that can run with quickness and elusiveness, be able to break tackles in a variety of ways, and all-around back that obviously playing at Alabama had to understand some blitz pickup schemes, and he also had to have the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. I look at TJ Yeldon, I think he could be a plug-and-play day 1 starter at the NFL level, and he's number 3 on my board. I like Tevin Coleman, a little bit more than Melvin Gordon, even though I don't think Coleman is the most elusive in terms of in the open field. He reminds me quite a bit of DeMarco Murray, honestly. But here's a guy that I saw make a lot of big runs when he was at Indiana, and he had some big games against some big-time teams. And I think he's a guy that can be similar to DeMarco Murray at the NFL level. In terms of guys that I think could surprise in terms of either A, where they're drafted, or B, their ability to produce at the NFL level, I look at a guy like David Johnson from Northern Iowa. My number 6 running back in this class reminds me a ton of a Matt Forte. Now, some of you might like Ajayi, and you might like him as a top 3 or 4 running back in this class. And to me, that difference between number 2 and maybe number 7 isn't all that great. So I could see where people, once you got past Gurley, between Duke, Yeldon, Coleman, Gordon, Johnson, and Ajayi, any configuration, any order between number 2 to 7, I think is just fine. I pretty much view all of them as, in that same type of range where there really isn't much of a difference, so I won't knock you if you grade this guy ahead of that guy, so on and so forth. Because I like Ajayi quite a bit too. Reminds me some maybe of an Arian Foster. I just happen to like David Johnson a little bit more. But another guy that I think could really surprise people in terms of where he's drafted might be Matt Jones out of Florida. Now, he might profile as a bit of a north-south between the tackles guy only, but here's a guy with big-time size. I think he's more explosive and quicker than he's given credit for. And those type of bell cow running backs have tremendous value at the NFL level. And for teams picking in the 3rd or 4th round, they could take a flyer on a guy like Matt Jones and say, hey, if nothing else, we've got a lightning quick scat back as our starter. Here's a plodding, somewhat plodding, at least more physical between the tackles, change of pace type of runner that could also serve as our goal line guy. These type of guys, again, can come in and be productive role players as rookies right away. And I think a guy like Matt Jones profiles as an NFL starter more than many people are giving him credit for. The one guy that I think is really overrated in this draft at the running back position, in my honest opinion, is Amir Abdullah from Nebraska. There's a lot to like about this guy, but it's just when you're projecting him to the NFL level, I have concerns. He's not that big. He has some ball security issues. He's not that explosive. He's not incredibly elusive in the open field. I don't think he's an incredibly physical runner in the sense that he breaks a lot of tackles. When you go back and watch his film in Nebraska, especially in 2014, here was a guy that I saw a lot of times. He fought hard. He ran hard. But once he got hit, that was pretty much the end of it. I mean, he had moments, but they were fleeting moments. And here, there are just guys in a class, again, that is so deep and so loaded. I just think there are guys that are safer, guys that are better all around, guys that are bigger, that are stronger, that are more explosive, that are more elusive. And that's why when I look at Amir Abdullah, I wouldn't be touching him in this draft with anything more than a mid to late 4th round pick, if not even a 5th round pick. And that's the truth. One other guy that I think profiles better than where he might end up being drafted might be a Karlos Williams from Florida State. Here's a guy that never really became what he should have become at Florida State, and he has some off-the-field baggage, but here is a guy that has size. He can run between the tackles. He's got some elusiveness in the open field. He's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. So you're looking for a guy maybe in the middle portion of day 3 in the 5th to 6th round that you can bring in. You're not sinking a lot of guaranteed money into him, but he could come in and play a role and play a nice role and maybe even step up and be a starter at some point in time as a rookie in certain type of situation. He's another guy that I would keep my eye on. Like I said, though, this is a really, really good running back class. I've got all my ratings of the running backs in the description box down below. Like I said, once you got past Gurley, the guys between 2 to 7, I think there's a lot of argument to be made for ranking him in any particular order. This is just the order that I rank them in. However, some of you, again, may be surprised where I have Amir Abdullah ranked, but frankly, if you get past the media spin and you get past what the mock draft experts have been telling you for months and you actually watch the film, I think more of you would actually agree with me that there are frankly just that many better prospects at this position in the 2015 NFL Draft.